2030. Over the past few months, there has been much relation drawn between climate change and this year. Reports portrayed it to be a deadline for action on climate change and the government's plan to achieve environmental goals before it. But what exactly is going to happen in 2030? At present, global average temperatures are 1 degree Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures. By 2030, this number is predicted to rise to 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. 1.5 degrees doesn't seem like much, but here's a simple breakdown of what a 2030 world will look like for human beings and the planet. Extreme weather events such as forest fires and hurricanes are frequent. More people displaced, tourism suffered, and the world is faced with enormous loss of life and property. Countries in the southern hemisphere are worst affected by widespread droughts and heat waves like the one experienced by Cape Town in 2018. Temperatures in the summer rise by 3 degrees Celsius. Throughout the world, glacial loss accelerates rapidly, and the Arctic, having now crossed its tipping point, begins to have ice-free summers. 4.8 million square kilometers of permafrost thaws. Sea levels rise 0.26 meters, having further implications on weather, marine ecosystems, and human lives and population. Rainfall patterns are erratic and extreme. Semi-El Niño conditions prevail around the world, and agriculture takes a huge blow. People's health is affected as a result of changing weather patterns, rising temperatures, and migration. As food security drastically reduces, malnourishment and starvation become more common and widespread. The transmission season and reach of diseases is increased, and waterborne sicknesses are frequent. Often, those affected lack basic healthcare facilities, and the climate becomes a feared cause of death. Jakarta, Dhaka, London, and Shanghai are among the cities most threatened by flooding due to low-lying land. As they sink at alarming rates, their trade, economies, and citizens hang in the balance. A slight rise in temperature has a devastating impact on the fragile coral reef systems. 70 to 90% of all coral reefs which support the marine ecosystem are soon to be dead. The economic costs of climate change keep increasing as over $300 billion are spent annually for disaster management. If temperatures aren't limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, soon there will be a 15% decline in global GDP. The previously mentioned will occur if the warming is of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, most countries and agreements aim to limit warming to 2 degrees Celsius. With half a degree difference, everything gets a lot worse. In a 2 degrees warmer world, nearly 40% of the world will be faced with regular extreme heat. The disasters will become more frequent and intense, and double the amount of plant and animal species will be lost. This warming will push Earth towards its tipping point, where its geological and natural systems will start functioning differently, making Earth into a self-heater. The forests, oceans, and soil will release the carbon they're storing and exacerbate the crisis significantly. According to Professor Schellnhuber of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Research, if we continue down this path, there is a very big risk that we will just end our civilization. The human species will survive somehow, but we will destroy almost everything we have built over the last 2,000 years. While these facts and predictions alone are enough to make anyone's blood run cold, it doesn't help to know that the one cause behind all of this is humans. Unconstrained carbon emissions coupled with rampant deforestation and resource overconsumption has brought this on us. While the transport and direct energy sector are notorious for enormous amounts of carbon emissions, some industries go unspoken about in textbooks and among the public. Let's have a look at the few overlooked industrial contributors behind the climate crisis. Number 1. Agriculture. This sector is the second largest contributor to the carbon emissions after energy, causing 24% of all global emissions. The main source of emissions from agriculture is the deforestation it causes, as the loss of carbon sinks means more carbon in the atmosphere. Cattle belching, a significant source of methane, adds to the mix, along with exhaustive water use and agriculture activities such as manure management, rice cultivation, burning of savannas, and crop residues, and more. The amount of resources used for agriculture is terrifyingly high, and unfortunately, more humans aren't being fed, as a majority of agricultural produce is commodity driven and used to feed animals. This has led to a destructive cycle where we invest precious resources for minimal profits in return. An example of this is how Beijing imports over 90 million tons of soy to feed their pigs. Meanwhile, in the Brazilian Amazon, deforestation caused by the increasing demand for soy is destroying one of the green lungs of the world, pushing it closer to becoming a savanna. It's ironic how industries that were born to satisfy basic human needs are now some of the most destructive to humans. And that brings us to number 2, the fast fashion industry. The fast fashion industry produces clothes that move quickly in and out of trends in an inexpensive manner. Fast fashion survives on cheap fabrics, labor outsourced from developing countries, and unregulated, unsustainable production. It contributes to around 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions due to its long supply chains and production, which consumes more energy than the aviation and shipping industry combined. But why does the production of our clothes have such a high carbon footprint? Major manufacturing hubs of fast fashion brands are in the global south, in developing countries such as India, Bangladesh, and China, who use coal-fired plants for most of their production. These clothes are then shipped to international retailers before yet again being sent to stores around the world, exponentially increasing the emissions per garment. Additionally, many of the fabrics used in fast fashion are derived from polymers and are essentially plastic. This means that even our clothes come from fossil fuels, the extraction and production of which is highly polluting. What's worse, 85% of the produced textiles end up in landfills or are incinerated even though they can be put to use. The fast fashion industry is also the highest consumer of fresh water after the agriculture industry in order to produce cotton, one of the world's most water-intensive plants. It is also highly polluting, producing around 20% of global wastewater, contaminated with industrial waste, microplastics, and dyes. If continued on the same path, the fast fashion industry's emissions will rise by more than 60% by 2030, which is detrimental for the future of our planet. Now, on to the third and last industry that I will be covering in this video, plastic. It doesn't come as a shock to many, because most people know that plastic is somewhat bad. But what exactly is it, and is it worth demonizing? Plastic is a common term for synthetic materials made out of polymers. While some plastics can naturally be made from plants and animals, a vast majority is artificially made through the processing of fossil fuels. Every stage of the plastic life cycle is highly polluting. In stage 1, emissions come from methane leaks and fuel combustion required during the extraction of oil and gas. And the emissions don't stop after extraction. The manufacturing of plastic is energy intense, contributing significant emissions through chemical processing of the raw materials. In addition, the management of plastic waste is abysmal. Although most plastic is recyclable, only 9% of all plastic ever produced was actually ever recycled. 12% of the waste is incinerated, causing toxic and carcinogenic emissions. The remaining 79% of plastic waste is dumped into landfills and oceans. Here, they start breaking down into smaller particles called microplastics that remain in the environment for hundreds of years, releasing greenhouse gases in the process. Microplastics in the ocean interfere with the sea's abilities to sequester and absorb carbon dioxide, reducing its potential as a carbon sink. They also enter the food and water cycle, and in the end, what we throw in the ocean ends up in us, through the water we drink, the air we breathe, or the food we consume. While knowing these facts and being aware is extremely important, it isn't enough. The climate crisis is becoming a more frightening reality by the day. If you want to do your part to have a safer future, watch my next video about the changes you can make in your lifestyle to reduce your carbon footprint. Thanks for watching.